Our next speaker, Mr. Stijn, Director Commercial Delivery at Port of Rotterdam, speaking on today's topic, Rotterdam from Fuel Hub to Power Fuel Hub. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Melvin, for the opportunity to speak at this distinguished energy meet for the Middle East, but actually primarily from Oman. I always say that a picture sometimes tells more than 1,000 words. And this picture is the entrance of the Port of Rotterdam, Europe's biggest port and the fuel hub of Europe, with 13% of all the energy of Europe coming through the port. The nice thing about this picture is that the scene turns green if the sun shines, and otherwise, if the sun doesn't shine, Netherlands can be pretty gray, and the sea can be gray brownish as well. On this picture, you can see a few things. Incoming container port, of course, with the big vessel coming in, as we are the biggest container harbor of Europe as well. On the left-hand side, you see a crude or oil products tanker sitting out. We are the big fuel hub of Europe. And in the middle, you see a coaster coming in. I'm not too sure what sort of coaster it is, but actually Rotterdam is also big up for coastal traffic inside Europe. And then for the closer readers on the right-hand side, you can see a couple of things happening already at the same time. First, you see a couple of windmills on the outskirts of the harbor. Secondly, you see them right behind the windmills. You can see these oil crude tanks. This is the Maasvlakte oil terminal, one of the big crude oil tank terminal in the harbor. And on the top right-hand side, you can see 3 LNG tanks. So you can already see the phases of the several projects and the several stages of energy transition happening. You can see oil, gas, and renewables all within a distance of a couple of 100 meters. And what you won't see, but I will discuss it later, is the actual the crossing under the sea towards our Portos carbon capture and storage project. And you can also not see that this area will be the place where the first hydrogen imports will happen inside Europe, I think. But let me try to explain how Rotterdam is wanting to change from a fuel hub to a biofuel hub. Rotterdam used to be and still is the big fuel hub where crude oil, coal, and natural gas enter the port, get used in the direct vicinity of the port, exported to the rest of the Netherlands, the region, and then into Northwest Europe. Where, of course, crude oil will find its way to Germany and Belgium. Coal will find its way indeed into Germany. Natural gas will stick a bit more into the Netherlands, although we're also expanding the LNG that gets regasified into other areas. But mainly, we are a very big oil products hub with big refineries that produce a lot of the diesel and the gasoline that is used to carry people from home to work, to heat the houses, etc., and to serve the purpose that they have been serving for a long time. We're also a big electricity producer with 2 of the biggest coal-fired power stations in the harbor. There's also a big gas-fired power station and quite considerable renewable power, as you saw on the little glimpse of the start of the port. Now, I don't need to explain to you that this will change dramatically over the next decades, and not just in 30 years' time, but it will already happen in the next 10 years, 5 to 10 years. Where we are based on fossil fuels, we will be based on hydrogen and electricity that we get from offshore wind. Hydrogen, as well, I'll explain later, will come in different forms and shapes from overseas. CO2 can be imported into the port and then stored offshore, as I will show, close to the old and now soon to be emptied gas fields offshore in the Netherlands. We'll also be the export hub of hydrogen and import hub through the rest of Europe. And electricity will not only be imported, but will also be generated, balanced, and played off against other commodities and play its function in the rest of Europe. There will be heat that will be used to heat because it can be quite cold in these parts of the world in the winter. And there will be steam much more extensively exchanged inside the port. So the port function itself will be the same, but the way we exercise the function will be different in the future. First on hydrogen, I would like to take you through a couple of these different energy systems and show you how we're going to change from a fuel hub to a power fuel hub. The vision that we have on hydrogen is actually a pretty simple one. We currently import and export about 100 million tons of crude oil and oil products in the port of Rotterdam. 100 million tons. And you can either argue it's going to be minus 90, minus 80, minus 70, or minus 100% in 30 years' time, but it will be much less. And we want to maintain our function as the energy hub of Europe by importing hydrogen. And we call this our yellow hockey stick on the right-hand side. We put a stake in the ground and said by 2050, we expect 20 million tons as hydrogen being imported and a little bit being produced in the harbor for actual use in the Netherlands, Germany, and other countries along. You can see that on the right-hand chart. 20 million tons is approximately equivalent to 200 gigawatts of power, wind electricity needed to produce this. And the wind is not sufficient that we have on the North Sea. The North Sea is a great potential for offshore wind. There's a lot of offshore wind already being produced, but it will mainly be used domestically in UK, Netherlands, Germany, Belgium, France, and the likes. But we expect a lot of yellow hydrogen to be produced, and we call it yellow because it comes from the sun, and mainly be PV solar, maybe combined with concentrated solar power with wind production from places far away. And these places you can see in the middle, it can be either from the Middle East, from Oman, of course, from North Africa, south of Europe, but also from far-flung places in Australia, Latin America, and other parts of the world where the sun shines and there's a bit more wind. And we expect to combine this with local production, the green sliver on the chart, a couple of million tons per year, started off and living alongside with blue hydrogen, as people call it, where carbon capture and storage will play the balancing role for the energy system. And we have plans to connect these grids, as currently is done by oil and gas. We also foresee this happening with hydrogen to Germany, to other industrial centers in the Netherlands as well. Where will the hydrogen come from? I don't need to explain this too much anymore. People will have seen these pictures. There's actually a simple map of the world where the sun shines and there's favorable wind conditions, so that the price of hydrogen produced can be below or approximately 1 to 2 euros or dollars per kilogram. These things always depend on the assumptions that you make on cost reductions, on integration. But what we clearly see is that Northwest Europe is pretty blue. Hydrogen locally produced will always be expensive. And for example, in the Middle East, Latin America, Australia, as well as in India and Pakistan, hydrogen will be cheaper when you ship it to Europe compared to the other way around. And as I said to you, it's not just the port of Rotterdam, and I will show you a few more zoom-in pictures, but we have splendid connections, existing connections with the Ruhrgebiet, even bigger industrial centers between Duisburg and Cologne in Germany, stretching all the way to the industrial heartland around Ludwigshafen. And here I sketch you some of the existing pipeline infrastructure, but also some of the planned future infrastructure for hydrogen and carbon capture and storage, where we connect Antwerp, Gemelot, Flushing, Ghent, Terneuzen, Duisburg and Cologne. So actually, this sort of shows why and how Rotterdam is actually this fuel hub of Northwest Europe. But it's not only about hydrogen. I'm very excited to talk about it, but let me show you a few other examples. This is part of a 3-step strategy, and I won't go through all the details. But on the left-hand side, where we have this yellow and orange bulbs, that's where you had the picture taken from the entrance of the port, 45 kilometers stretching from the North Sea all the way into the center of Rotterdam. And the port is not just a port, it's an industrial port where there's a lot of activities along the way. And you can see a lot of activities around energy transition, be it in step 1, which we call efficiency and infrastructure, step 2, where we get new power, new energy systems in, and step 3, where we see complete new raw materials and fuel systems entering. And that makes this hub function so interesting for players. They want to be in Rotterdam, they are in Rotterdam, and they want to be it in the future, because you can optimize the various commodity streams as things go along. We have a great electricity grid, and I won't bore you with the details, but we expect about 7-8 gigawatt of offshore wind to enter the Maasvlakte on the left-hand side, with landings, as you saw it from this picture, all the way here, and landing, it's in Dutch a little bit, but we expect extra offshore wind in lots of 2 gigawatt, 4 gigawatt even here on the DC lines coming from the offshore wind sector. connecting, of course, not only the Rotterdam port area itself, the Europort, the Botlek, around Pernis area, the inner port, but connecting the rest of the Netherlands as well. Heat networks can be very useful. Certainly, as we plan, and I will show you a little later, electrolyzers about 2 gigawatt or here on this outskirt of the harbor, in electrolyzing, making hydrogen out of offshore wind. We produce a lot of heat. Now we are lucky that we have a lot of people living in north and south of the port, as well as in Rotterdam. We have existing heat networks, and we'll plan to expand them with this yellow bar, with the orange, as well as with the red ones, so that we get very high efficiencies of the heat used in the harbor itself. Carbon capture and storage. We work with the Portos project on the carbon capture and storage project, where we think the harbor has a potential to store approximately 10 million tons per year additional CO2. But the interesting thing is that there is already carbon capture and utilization in the harbor happening around the OCAP pipeline, where we use CO2 to feed and to flourish the cultivation of flowers and vegetables in our glass houses. And we see a lot of other interested parties coming and looking at the combination of renewable hydrogen plus CO2 as a source for example, green methanol production. We expect this to be extended, these pipeline systems, these CO2 pipeline systems, to the rest of Northwest Europe. So suddenly you can have new carbon streams and new value streams being emerging in the port. And as I said, and I started, we also expect a big hydrogen network. And again, in this port of Rotterdam, there are already wide existing hydrogen pipelines. They tend to be a little small. We really plan to lay down a very big backbone in the harbor, where we connect new electrolysis in the harbor, offshore wind producing hydrogen in the port. We connect it with existing refineries, biorefineries and the like, as well as expect to cater for imports coming from overseas. And then, as is shown before you, pipelines in study connected to the rest of the Netherlands, to Germany, Belgium, and beyond. So 5 key projects that all are aimed at CO2 reduction, hydrogen backbone to hydrogen east-west connections, gigawatts extra of offshore wind coming to Rotterdam for electrification and green energy, Portos carbon capture and storage project that will form the basis for carbon capture utilization in the industry as well as expanding a residual heat network to The Hague, Rotterdam, and other towns and greenhouses in the vicinity of the port. So 5 key projects, all aimed at new energies in the port. And this brings me sort of to the last observation, and not many people are fully aware of that. So it's interesting that Rotterdam can act as a power fuel hub for Europe, but we have a special connect with Oman through the port of Sohar, where we have very successful partnership, and we are a 50% partner. And the port of Sohar actually has very unique and similar opportunities and challenges. Energy transition will happen because it's good for the world and the world wants it. And you can see both on the industrial side, you can see the similarities, what we learn in Rotterdam and what people learn in Sohar, being mutually interesting for each other to exchange. And you also have unique chance to establish future hydrogen value chains. Because what we do lack in the Netherlands is good sun, good wind, and lots of space. What you do have in Oman is these opportunities where you can eventually easily imagine hydrogen value chains to be linking our 2 ports together, so the port of Sohar and the port of Rotterdam. So thanks, Melvin, for this opportunity to show you a little bit what this biggest energy port in Europe is doing around energy transition, what specific opportunities and lessons and learnings will arise in the future that connects Oman with the Netherlands and hopefully turns the sea a bit more green than it has been over the last decades. So thanks for this, and hope you can, if there's any questions, I'm more than happy to take them. Of course, you can share them outside the meeting with me, and we'll come back to them.
Thank you, sir, for your presentation. So I remember last year I came across the CEO of Port of Sohar, and there were some big promising projects for hydrogen in Port of Sohar as well, right?
Yeah.
So this is knowledge sharing between Port of Rotterdam and Oman?
Of course, there's knowledge sharing. We are a shareholder in the port, but it's much more interesting that the teams actually cooperate with each other to actually see where the opportunities lie, how they lie. And many of the opportunities lie actually in the more efficient organization of your port, being able to offer unique infrastructure capabilities to existing customers, to new customers, and to think about hydrogen value chains between export and import. So I think we're working very closely on all these fronts.
And I think globally also, whenever there is anything to do with ports and port development, I think we all look up to Port of Rotterdam always, you know.
It's good to hear. We hope to be not only the biggest, but also the smartest port of Europe, and share a lot of our knowledge with others, because it's in the benefits. And these ports are industrial hubs. They are nodes that connect people through food, through power, through steels and metals, through cement and other necessities of life. So good functioning, well-functioning energy ports and other ports are, of course, essential ingredients to successful functioning of the world economy.
Any future exciting projects we can look forward to?
Well, as I said, it depends a little bit on which sector you live. We also have a lot of digitalization opportunities in the port. What becomes most exciting, if you think about these new energy hubs and the role and the combination with the digitalization, how new intermittent fuel supplies can actually play a role. And then if you think a little bit bigger and look beyond Rotterdam into the whole of Northwest Europe, this becomes a very interesting renewal of the industrial scale and size of Northwest Europe, and that will scale off a lot of benefits and learnings for other industries across the globe, and provides whether you're a hydrogen fan or a carbon capture fan or biomethanol fan, you can find it, let's say, in Rotterdam.
All right, sir. Thank you very much for your time and presentation, and hope to meet you in one of our events soon.
Thank you, Melvin, and thanks for your time.
Thank you, sir. Have a nice evening ahead. Bye-bye.
Same to you.